Hey, welcome to the Uncommon Life podcast, the show where Lewis, Rich and myself delve into topics that are helping us build towards being in the best shape and health of our lives. It's fair to say that we're quite far into that journey. That said, we're changing our minds on various topics as we learn more about ourselves, and there's also some things that we each find uniquely challenging. Our hope is that you can relate to some of our journeys and challenges, and that you find it inspiring and useful as you build towards being in the best shape and health of your life. In episode 3, we discuss what might be the best way to start making health a bigger priority in your life. We know at the beginning it could be hard. You might be overweight, you might be lacking energy, you might be wondering where you're going to find the time to work out. Perhaps you're struggling with confidence. You might just not know where to start. But there's always a place you can start, and there's a bunch of things that you can do that will make it easier to take those first steps and to start to build some consistency towards better health habits. Before we jump in, if you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could leave a rating or review wherever you're listening to this. It only takes a few seconds, and it's a great way to support the show. Okay, let's jump into the episode. Before we kind of get into kind of some of the advice and the tactics for somebody that kind of wants to make a change, right? It might be a good idea to think about, who is a persona? What type of person are we talking to? Because I think the advice will generally be pretty broad, but there's some edge cases as well, right? Where you probably have to be pretty careful. So, hey, Lewis and Rich, I'm happy for you jump in and kind of maybe let's have a conversation about defining like that persona of person that we're going to kind of give some advice to, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. Lewis, you want to go first?
I'll dive in. All right. So when I was thinking about this, I guess I had a kind of picture of a person who has done a bit of training before, so has done a bit of weight training, but then life has kind of taken over. So working, family, kids, time, and it's just kind of struggling to prioritize it in that sense. So that's kind of the person that we're looking at, probably slightly a little overweight, but has previously worked out. So it's not completely foreign to them, wants to get back into it, but just doesn't quite know where to start. So I think that's the kind of person that I'm looking at. Probably mid-30s, could be any age, but I think the person that I'm looking at when I'm thinking about it, that's kind of the person that I was thinking of. I've got a couple of people in mind who I know. I won't mention names.
Let's say their name and offend them.
Yeah. Somebody actually reached out to me and they're like, so what would you recommend I do? How shall I get back into things? Which is why I was kind of thinking of them in that kind of way. And I think so if I just dive in, so I think the mistake that I think a few of these kind of personas or people would make would be like diving into the weights and hitting it really hard, really quickly, because they just want to go and lift heavy weight, go to the gym, get strong. And just in my mind, I think that's just a completely wrong approach. So, because in the end, it just ends up being inconsistent, get hurt, get injured, can't always make it to the gym. So I guess if I was thinking of, do we want to dive into like advice or thoughts, or do we want to kind of like delve into a bit more into the person? Would you guys add to anything in there with that?
I mean, on that person side, I think I'm just going to play on you a little bit there with regards to kind of the inconsistency, the yo-yoing. So I think that was something I struggled with for a very long time, probably 10 years or so, which is, the priorities of life get in the way of your exercise priorities. Naturally, you've got kids and work and how it goes. And I think a lot of people, that's just the natural flow of things, right? You don't worry about your health too much when you're young, in your teens and your early 20s. You just naturally come out and about and doing stuff. Maybe you form an unhealthy relationship with food. That then kind of drives in when you go to work. Then you work too many hours, and then you have a family, and you've got money stress and life stress. And I think you end up with inconsistent behavior. So what I was thinking personas wise was just more, maybe slightly broader, that there's a bunch of people that haven't cracked the code in terms of like they're getting their health under control. And I think that's really broad. I think that is both, I think men, women, anyone who just haven't prioritized health consistently. And I think the key word there is consistent. So yeah, similar to yourself, I think where you mentioned strength, I think I see it more of just like habits. like the inconsistency. But I think, I think there's loads of people where this fits with. So for me, I'm going to use myself and my wife as kind of good kind of scenarios, good kind of base cases of where, people have kind of, I've never been super unhealthy. No one would have ever said, "Oh, you're obese," but definitely not in good shape. Because for a very long period of time, probably 10 years or so, prioritized life, work, kids, family. And in between that was always yo-yoing, like, having moments of being healthy and then moments of it kind of falling away.
That's really good. That's really good, because actually, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of my wife. So, because initially I was thinking of a mate, but then actually it does really just broaden out. It could be anyone. So my wife. So we've recently had a baby. So we've got a 10-month-old child. She's done a bit of exercise here and there. Always wants to do it. Can never really quite get into that routine of doing it. Has had fits of doing it really consistently for like 6 months. So then it just falls off. We've had 3 babies in the last 6 years. So there's always been like a change. And now it's kind of, for her, where would she start? I'd say, what would I do? What would you recommend I do? I've got a baby, about to go back to work. I know I want to exercise. I know I need to do this. Where am I going to find the time? Number one. And it's also just that initial starting point as well, because it can be so hard to actually just start. What do I do? Am I going to go to the gym? Am I going to do a spin class? Am I going to go do like a body pump? Probably not. It'd say, where do I start? Yeah. Good point.
I mean, like, if I try and think about myself and where I struggled to make a shift, because I've been there as well. If I wind back 10 years, I had trained before. There might have even been a bit of inconsistent training going on, but I just let work get away with itself, and I was probably 2 or 3 stone overweight. Again, I didn't look like gigantic or anything, but you could definitely tell I had a belly. My energy was low. It was just hard work to think about how to break out of that and get into something consistent, right? And that's how I started to think about if I found myself in that position again, or it could be anybody that just hasn't ever trained, like you mentioned, Lewis, your wife, that type of stuff. I started to think more around kind of mindset and having a couple of rules clear in your head rather than the tactics, because I think if you can wire your brain to think about things in the right way, everything thereafter gets quite easy. And there is some tactic stuff which I think like we'll probably align around what would be the right types of things to start with. But like the big thing for me was when I first start, or when I would try and get out of that slump, I would just want things to happen really fast. By the way, this still happens. Like, there's probably not a week that goes by where we don't. Lewis, you're probably better than me and Rich, where me and Rich kind of get a little bit impatient with where we are and where we want to get to, etc. And it's like, I think, if I could start, it would be first of all just to really kind of align to myself around the fact that like this is the start of a journey. It's going to be something that's a lifestyle forever, and it takes a long time to turn yourself around if you're in a bit of a slump and you're out of shape and you need to get back into things. So you have to just be really, really comfortable that the results aren't going to come super quick. Because if you get really caught up with wanting things to happen super, super quick, it just causes a lot of bad side effects. If you chop and change programs a lot because you don't feel you're getting in, and there's nothing worse than starting out and then just chopping and changing your tactics loads. You can't measure against it. You don't build any sort of consistency. So that would definitely be the one thing I would advise someone to start with, is just to really get clear in their head that it's a start of a journey. You've got to be in it for the long haul, and you've got to be patient. And it starts with building some consistent behaviors. And then I think the second thing that jumped into my mind that kind of is connected with that is you have to start small. And you have to try and build a consistent habit. And again, you can only really do that if you wire your brain to thinking it's the start of a journey in the first place. And if you can get comfortable with that, you can then get comfortable with, well, of course, you just start small and you're consistent, and you can kind of feel okay about that. Because again, if you try and layer things on too quickly, and I've done this in the past as well, where it's like, right, from Monday, that's it. I'm going to go paleo. We're going to train in the gym 4 times a week. I'm going to take all my supplements.
Yeah.
It doesn't last much longer than 2 weeks before all of the wheels come off. And you're just
3
like,
days.
I didn't get anywhere close. It was too overwhelming. Like 2 weeks is generous, right? So they were the 2 big things that jumped into my mind. be really comfortable that it's a start of a journey, and think long haul, sustainable kind of lifestyle changes, and start small and build consistency, and then layer on a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And I think if you can have that mindset shift around those two things, it becomes a much more enjoyable journey, and you actually end up building consistency and you'll get results. A lot of what haunted me when I try to make changes and what I see other people do is just trying to kind of expect results to come too quickly, and they start off fully loaded. It causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think that expectation thing's massive, right? Especially if that expectation thing is body composition changes. I'm going to go do this thing, and I expect by the end of the month to have lost a stone in weight. I mean, apart from starving yourself or maybe cutting off an arm, that's just super unrealistic. And I think that leads to the yo-yoing as well, because you lose your motivation. If you started off with that as your goal, as your motivating factor, when it doesn't happen, you just immediately come straight off it. So yeah, I agree with you entirely there, Daniel. Definitely on small changes. And then I suppose, this is where the small change becomes a habit. And then you do another small change, and then that becomes a habit. And then, over time, they stack up. And then you will see the results. But I think the goal has to be just consistency. If you can't do something consistently, then it's just not going to work. And for me, I lean more towards nutrition than I do exercise with it. So if let's say someone said to me, hey, look, I want to make a change. Let's just take a persona. I'm 40 years old. I've been working really hard for the last 15, 20 years. I've had a couple of kids. Male or female is kind of irrelevant at this point. I've dabbled with this, I've dabbled with that, but I'm really unhappy. I want to lose some fat. I want to build some muscle. I want to live longer. I've got aches and pains. I'm heading towards pre-diabetes or whatever else. My first thing every time it's just nutrition. Actually, it's nearly every single time. Let's just look at what you eat, and can we just move you towards good quality whole foods and cut down the takeaways and the shit. If we can just get you to a healthy place, still has to be balanced, has to work with life, has to work with kids and going out on meals out. But if we can just get you to a place where we're shifting that diet to a healthier place, for me, that is how I lean towards step one, because I think once your nutrition is just in a better place, and I think, we spoke about this before, and Daniel, I know you're a massive 80-20 rule fan. So let's just say if 80% of your nutrition Monday to Friday is good quality whole foods and well balanced, I think all the other stuff then starts clicking, because I think you have more energy, you feel better, you will see results on the scale and your body composition. And then I think it sets you up really nicely for the next change. Where I know for me, if the first thing is go hit the gym really hard 2 or 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and you don't change anything else on the nutrition side, you're fighting a losing battle and you won't see progress. And then I think that's really demotivating, and then it causes the yo-yo again. So I don't know where you guys fit on that, but that's my general step one.
How do you combat someone, for example, let's say I was that 30-year-old dude, overworked, and I'm speaking to you and you give me a mindset talk, right? It's the start of a journey, be consistent. I'm like, yeah. And you're like, cool, let's talk whole foods. It's that's fucking boring. I want to be in a gym, right? I don't want to start with let's have less desserts. I want to get in a gym. I want to do something exciting, because you kind of need that to kind of feel good about it. So it's how do you deal with that?
Do you know, when you said that, here's the first thing that jumps in my head is that person goes to the gym, they do a big weight training session, and they think they've then justified that dessert they're going to go and eat. So when they come out of the gym, they go straight home and they eat a dessert. Completely neutralizing any concept to making progress in the gym and going further back when they did before. So I think...
I was just going to say one thing. So I would probably strip it back a bit on the 80-20. And if we're really thinking about somebody starting off who hasn't had those consistent food habits. So I think you're 100% right, Rich. We need to start, nutrition needs to be in there as well. I'd actually say on a daily basis, change one meal. So make one meal really healthy. So instead of breakfast, lunch, dinner, do what you normally do for breakfast, do what you normally do for dinner, change your dinner around. Don't have dessert, or don't have a pizza. Try and have meat and veg for dinner. Let's start with that. Or if it's breakfast, maybe have a protein shake for breakfast. and a cup of coffee. That might tie you over till lunch, and then just do what you normally do for lunch and dinner. So I'd probably change it. Just have one good meal a day.
Yeah, which is a
and
start
do that
small thing, right?
Yeah,
Start small.
Yep.
Start small
and feel
so
good about that, and then you'll slowly.
One good meal. Yeah, one good meal. Do that consistently for a week, 2 weeks, and then layer in another good meal. So it could be for 2 days. Maybe have a breakfast and lunch that's, it'd be meat, veg. Just less refined sugars, less crisps. Try to don't have the packet crisps or the chocolate. Just try and focus on that, and then just incrementally increase it. Because I think the 80-20 is like way down the road, isn't it? That's like way down the road, 6 months later. So it's probably a layer it in.
I mean, 80-20 for me is the end point.
Yeah.
Right, and it's taken a while for me to. It's taken some binging to get through to the 80-20 point for me.
Because I mean, somebody reached out, mentioned it to me the other day, and they were like, "Oh, have you ever done the shakes?" Because I'm thinking of just having shakes for breakfast, lunch, and then just like a normal meal for dinner. Because they want to get really into it straight away, and it's that may work for like a week, but then you're going to get hungry. You're going to go so. It could even, if you wanted to do like a meal replacement shake for breakfast and then just have your normal lunch and dinner, I think that would probably work. And you could do that 5 days of the week. So it could be like a protein shake, or it could be like your normal breakfast and a protein shake for lunch, and a cup of coffee or a bowl of fruit or a banana or something like that, just to try and rein in on the calories. Yeah. So that could work. Just that layered in 1 meal, 2 meals, and then adding in.
Yeah, I really like that concept. Now, personally, I don't like meal replacement shakes really. I don't like the processed nature of them, so I would. There's not something I would ever recommend, but I totally get the small change. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think those small, tiny changes. Even if I think you mentioned Chris, if you just stop the snacking, if the first month the only thing you do is stop snacking between your 3 main meals, or whatever. Yeah, no, I like that. So
another really great point: no snacking. Have 3 meals, no snacking. That's a great, because how often do people snack? It's that snacking in between the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, having a snack.
Yeah, I think it's about finding that one thing which is like a first incremental step for you that's not too big, and something that can kind of like start the journey, right? Because then it's about layering on top of that. Like as I thought, like beyond the mindset stuff around, it's a journey, be very comfortable with small changes that you can be consistent with and layer on top of. I start to think, well, look, most things fall under kind of 3 main buckets. Like one of them is activity. Like if you want to make a change, you've got to make some sort of change around your activity. I mean, again, you can just do the nutrition piece, but again, it's a bit boring if the first thing you think about is I'm just going to make one nutrition change. So I was thinking I would think about it in 3 ways. One would be activity, one would be food, because we all know how important that is, and the other one would be there's a bunch of sort of self-care habits that are kind of necessary to feel better and to actually put your training and your nutrition to good use, whether it's sleep or water and those types of things. And I would say that if you can look across those things and pick one really small change that you feel is very doable but can set you off on the journey, then you just focused on 3 things, and they can be quite small. And like you mentioned, for the food one, it could be some of it's just down to what is the first step that you can be consistent with. And actually sometimes what's your vice? Like what is the one thing that for you, if you can change, makes a big difference? Like for example, for me, I have this real temptation to snack in the evenings. So I have my normal meal about 8 p.m. and then, it gets to 9 p.m. and I'm looking around cupboards and I'm like, what's going on with that? There must be a penguin or a Kit Kat inside, right? Or like maybe I'll walk to the shop and grab a chocolate bar, and that adds 500 calories every day. It just does. So if I could be like, I don't change anything about my whole day, but basically my cutoff is dinner, and then I stop the snacking, and I managed to do that for a couple of weeks. That's an amazing change, and then you can layer on something else. But that's me, right? Somebody else might struggle with something completely different. Like for example, they're mid-morning. They might have a nice healthy breakfast, but then mid-morning they just go out of control, and it's like I can't wait between breakfast and lunch. And for them it might just be, I'm going to commit to no morning snacking, and you do that, and I think you don't even worry about what comes after it, because I think once you've got that down, and it usually takes like 2 to 4 weeks to probably feel like, whoa, I've made a change and like I'm on the journey. You then just think, well, what's the next thing? And wow, like again, it requires that longer range thinking. You do that over the course of a year, and my gosh, you've changed a lot about yourself and you're starting to see really big results. But again, it's just trying to pick that one small thing across probably those three categories, which is activity, food, and I think kind of self-care type
So
habits.
if we were
That's
to,
pretty unique as well, isn't it? Right? It's very much down to the individual of what's going to make the most difference for them. Like some people actually are under-eating, massively under-eating. It's just what they're eating itself isn't great quality. And some people do loads of activity. Like, I mean, the other day I was out walking the dog and it's just an observation. It was Sunday. There's loads of runners out. And nearly every single one of the runner was carrying way, way too much weight. Like way too much weight. Like really like carrying a lot of weight. And it makes you think, well, these are people who are out and they're active, they're doing something. So why are they carrying so much weight? Well, you just know that's nutrition. So again, for those people, it's the thing isn't activity necessarily, like it looks like it's not activity. Instead, for them, there's something else going on, which is kind of causing kind of those kind of impacts. So yeah, it's very unique. Totally agree. It's very unique.
But that kind of highlights how you need to think about it fairly holistically as well. Because if all you do is, again, I try and kind of think back to me being a 30-year-old dude that put work ahead of everything, overweight, feeling rubbish, and you're like, right, I'm just going to go to the gym 3 times a week. We all know that is, you might see some changes, but the reality is like the handbrake's going to be on because you've got to make some sort of change around your nutrition. But even if you make some change around your nutrition and you start getting to the gym, but you're still sleeping 4 hours a night, you're going to really, really struggle to break out of it. So I think, across it, if you can think, well, look, how can I be more active? How can I eat better? And is there some sort of kind of like, self-care kind of habit or something that needs to be on point outside of training and food that I can start to change? Because the reality is if you only hit one of those pillars, or even in some cases, 2 of those pillars, you're kind of shortchanging yourself a lot. So yeah, I think you mentioned the runner as well, right? Like some of those might just be people that for the last 5 years, they've built up good stamina, they're running, but the reality is they've never thought about nutrition or any of the self-care habits. Or it could be someone that's just starting out and going too fast and they're running 5K and actually they should be walking and not running, right? It's hard to know like what profile of person they are, but that is probably quite a big mistake, is not thinking about this holistically and just going in on one thing like the gym or just food. But the reality is you probably need to make a small change across those areas rather than one big change in just one.
Yeah, and I think you need to identify whoever that person is, the persona is, the one change they can make, which feels good, so they can kind of adopt it for a long term and then add another change and then another change. So, for example, you mentioned sleeping 4 hours. I think we all know, because we're so tuned in, that if you don't get enough sleep and the good quality sleep, trying to stay on point with your diet the next day is incredibly hard. And then trying to do a really good workout is incredibly hard. So like that's just like one of those things. But I never would have attempted to fix sleep first. In fact, anything, if you told me that 5 years ago, I would have gone, go away. I don't need sleep. I need to work and make progress.
I have to say, I get a little bit touchy when we talk about sleep. I haven't had a decent night's sleep for 10 months. Sleep is not something I get that's decent.
I think sleep is quite dependent per person, actually.
Yeah. It's because I think the only thing I'd elaborate on the sleep thing, I get a little touchy about it.
Sorry, when you say you haven't had a good night's sleep, what do you define as a good night's sleep? Like
uninterrupted, 7 hours uninterrupted to me is like a good sleep. And I think it depends, because there's a lot of people talking about how important sleep is, and I get it. But it's just, I've got 3 kids under 7, and I've got a 10-month-old baby. I ain't getting a good night's sleep. My wife hasn't had a decent night's sleep in 10 months. To talk to her about trying to get, she will smash somebody in the face. If they say you need to concentrate on your sleep, she'll be like, "Fuck you! I have a baby. I can't sleep." So,
but that's how it's super dependent, right? It's super dependent. So, for example, your wife, if it was like, "What can you do?" It wouldn't be like, right, sleep. By the way, sleeping 7 hours is really hard. Like I find it hard, right? Like even with the amount of effort I put into my sleep, I get to 6.5, and I sometimes drop below it, right? And in the last couple of months, I've dropped below 80% for 6.5 for a bunch of other reasons. So it's hard. But again, like, so in your wife's case, that wouldn't be the one thing to focus on. If you think about like activity, self-care, and food, you might say, well, look,
of some sort. I mean, try and get a walk. Try and go for a walk once, 3 times a week. Try and go for a 45-minute walk. try and feel
Or the self-care
find that
thing,
in
rather
someone.
than sleep there, it could be like, well, if that's just too hard to address, it could be like committing to drinking a litre of water because your wife just doesn't drink any water. I'm not saying that she doesn't drink any water, but it's like trying to work out like what is the one thing around, like, outside of activity and food, which I'm just classifying as a self-care type of habit that helps you feel good and it puts you in a good position to make the most out of moving around and eating well. What's the one change that you can make that would make the biggest difference for you, and what's a small step, and then you just try and get some consistency around that. So sleep would be a bad example for your wife, for example.
Like the needle, like which one thing can you look at? It could be like a teenager that's staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning, though, that has no reason not to get a decent amount of sleep. Or it could be somebody that has a baby who, like, sleep isn't the priority and it's more being active. So picking that one thing that is going to move the needle for you, that you can do relatively consistently over a longer period, and going into in that mindset of, I'm going to do this for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
But even like, I would even say, like, it doesn't have to move the needle. Because again, moving the needle almost suggests like you need to kind of see a result quite quickly. The reality is like, you've just got to, I mean, I know what you're saying, right? You want to see some sort of result, but the reality is like, you just need to get into a better habit with something and build the consistency around it. And the moving the needle bit might just be a little bit further to the right than you think, but you've got to start somewhere.
I don't know. I think for habits to stick, at least for me, and I'm talking here personally, for habits to stick, I kind of do need to see some movement of that needle, because I need that, like, positive reinforcement. So, for example, like, so sleep for me actually is pretty important, and that never used to be. And I was kind of, was, like I say, I was in a previous life was a workaholic, and sleep was almost irrelevant. But in the last couple of years, it's become important. So now I do try and prioritize it. I fail miserably. I went to bed last night at 1 a.m, saying, obviously, I was in the gym at 11 o'clock at night, saying, obviously failed miserably, but I try to. And what I notice is, if I get good sleep a few days in a row, my Whoop recovery is nice and high in the green, massively optimized. Ignore me what I'm saying there. But I find it's much easier then to control my natural diet cravings for sugary stuff.
For sure.
Where if I don't get good sleep for 2 or 3 days in a row, have a weekend, have a couple of meals out with friends, a few drinks or whatever else, and then I start struggling, my cravings for sugary stuff starts appearing, and it's much worse. So what I've discovered for me is that, hey, if I can get sleep into a good place, keeping nutrition where I want it to be, which isn't natural for me, is easier. So that was the needle to the right for me, which was, there's a pattern here. Sleep well, less likely to go off on my diet. Sleep badly, way more likely to go off my diet. And my vice is, I'm a grazer. Like, I'm an unconscious eating grazer. So if I don't pay attention, I'll just pick things throughout the day. I'll walk past a cupboard and I'll grab a handful of nuts. I'll open the fridge and just see what's around. I'm going to the kids' lunch. I'm eating half it as I'm making it. Like,
making yourself porridge, making yourself cheap porridge every half an hour.
Too. Yeah.
No, but like if I'm in the wrong place with that cheap porridge, it'll be a double portion. I will just go, I'll just have a bit more. So it's for me that was the sleep pieces. I've discovered that for me, getting that under control makes the other habits easier to stick to, which are not natural for me, because I would naturally not stick to those dietary habits. And so I think as part of it, right, when someone's thinking about, okay, I want to make a change, I think there's an element of like, well, as an individual, we can give you these pillars, Daniel, as you mentioned, like to think about, and some of them you'll find much easier to adopt than the other ones. So maybe the best thing to do is take the easy ones first. Yeah. For example, let's say one of those pillars is steps. Let's say you're at home right now, you've got a dog, and you're like, actually, you know what? I could walk the dog every morning. I could probably get my kind of good number of steps in every day. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah. The only thing I'm going to do now is from now on, I'm going to make sure that I get up and I take the dog out for a walk, and I'm going to go and get myself 5,000, 7,000 steps done. I'm not going to do around the block, which takes 15 minutes. I'm going to go up the track and it take half an hour. But what I'm going to do is get those steps in to start the day. That might be for someone a really easy thing to do, which is on the activity pillar. And once they've done that for a few weeks, then they can think about tackling something else. But that's
a great example of where you go back to the mindset stuff and you realize that, like, you have to have patience, because again, I was always trying to go back to, like, I was exactly there. I was 30, I was 15 stone. I was feeling just like super lethargic in places. And if you try to tell me, and I'm like, Googling like workout splits and, I want to get into the gym 5 times a week. And if you'd have said, right, cool, the next 30 days around walking 5K steps, man, that's a hard one to kind of, I'm wondering whether you would, Rich, I'm wondering whether you would take that advice.
Obviously not. You know,
Well,
I was like, I wouldn't have paid any attention to any of us. Like,
all right. So could we get into like a bit of a program then? So let's say, so your 30-year-old self then, Daniel, in terms of like a training program. So you're saying that you're looking at all loads of different splits and other bits and pieces. Knowing what you know now, what would you recommend to your 30-year-old self to say, all right, do this, mate?
Yeah. Well, look, here's what I would do. Like, again, I keep banging on about it, but again, it requires that mindset shift. And I think if you can have that mindset shift, then if I think about those 3 pillars, this is what I would advise. I would say on the activity front, if you can just get into a habit of walking, that's the first thing I would do. It gets you out, it gets you moving. I think walking's super underrated. I think if you can build a habit of 5K steps, it's an incredible habit to build, and it gets you moving, and it gets you doing something. I think if you try and, I would want to jump in and do 3 full body sessions per week and start progressive overload and start, building up. But again, I've done that like 20 times, and you burn out after a month or so because the other thing, and it's just too quick. So for me, I would say 5K steps. Change one thing on the food front. It doesn't matter what it is. It actually really doesn't matter what it is. Try and find something to you that's going to make quite a big difference and is something that you think can help make a shift. And then pick one self-care habit. And again, like getting super tactical. If I could tell myself, walk 5K steps, make an improvement to sleep, and cut out desserts. If you did that for 30 days, man, you've taken like a number of steps forward. And then the next step forward could be 10K steps. The next step forward could be maintain 5K steps and get into the gym twice a week and just do a 30-minute weights workout. And then it could be taking the nutrition a bit. But that's where I would go. I would probably go steps. Like if someone was super like, no way, I am not walking, I need to be training, then again, it could be right, cool, okay, let's just bring things back down to maybe a couple of days, full body, half-hour sessions. Something super basic, there's based on compound movements. But again, don't try to get ahead of yourself. Don't try and kind of like whack loads of weight on the bar. So again, this is very individual, right? Because 5K steps to one person might be so underwhelming and so boring, they're just not going to stick with it. I think it's the better way to do it and to build up from there. But maybe that person does need to get in the gym twice a week. But then it's about reining that in and saying what's an appropriate 2 times a week thing to do for 30 days. So you can just kind of like nail that bit. And then you can build from there. But I think you have to start pretty small one way or another.
See, I like everything you've said. I'd probably amend the workout, and I would say to somebody. So if I were talking to somebody like the 30-year-old self or somebody who's asking me, I would say don't go to the gym. I would say focus on some real fundamental basics that you can do at home. I'd say push-ups, squats. Get yourself a band, or if you can do a pull-up, if you're fit enough to do a pull-up, use a pull-up bar, or get a band and do like band pull-up parts. And this is exactly what I spoke to my nephew about, who was with me over here, because he wants to get into the gym, and he was going to the gym once, twice a week, and he needs dad to drive him there, or he hadn't passed his test and he couldn't get there. And I was like, just do it at home. I was like, push-ups, and I did a workout with him, and I was like, all right, he could do, and I'm not trying to, like, he could do 3 push-ups. He couldn't do a pull-up, but he could smash out some squats. And I was like, this is what we're going to do. This is what your workout's going to be. You're going to do 1 push-up or 2 push-ups. You're going to do 5 band pull-up parts, and you're going to do 10 squats. And we're going to do it for 20 minutes and just see how you go. And then build on that. So I would really just say to somebody, if they wanted to start out and they wanted to work out, and if the steps didn't kind of float their boat, push-ups, squats, like pull-ups or band pull-up parts, and just rinse and repeat and do like 15 minutes 3 times a week. Because if that's going to get you moving and feeling a bit better, and then build it up slowly. And then once you can do, work yourself up to doing 50 push-ups, 100 squats, 50 pull-up parts, build on that. If you can work up, and then slowly, like over the course of like, I love what you said earlier around like going really slow, but consistent. That's something that I'm like 100% on now with my weighted vest. I'm in it for the long run. I'm just doing it consistently, and I'm going to build up slowly. I'd start from beginning on like just no vest, push-ups, squats, pull-ups, and then just slowly build up. If you can do 100 of each 3 times a week, you're in a really good space. I don't even think we need the barbells and going to the gym. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate it, and then we look at splits, and and then you hurt yourself. And it's like, if you could do like build up to 200 push-ups, 200 squats, like 50 pull-ups, and you're doing that 4 times a week, you will be in some pretty decent shape. So I guess that's the bit of advice I would add to anyone that's really thinking of getting into it, who maybe has ducked in and out of the gym. And say, don't worry about the gym. If you don't have the time, you're busy working, you can get a really good workout at home with your own body weight in like 20 minutes, and then just build on that.
I think so much comes from...
By the way, Lewis, I think that's super spot on. My dog's barking, so I'm just going to let him out. I'll be back in a sec.
Okay.
Are we pausing or going without you? We'll just carry on without him. I'm going to carry on without you. You should go away. I agree with your stuff so much. And also, like, obviously knowing you and seeing the progress you continue to make and how consistent you are, you can see how that builds a lifetime habit. You pretty much do it like, what's it? You almost every day, cardio strength, cardio strength, cardio strength.
Yep.
Which, you've reached a point where, like, that's it now. That's your daily habit. There's no reason to think that I'll ever stop. I mean, I'm sure some stuff might get in the way. Life gets in the way, but in general, it's just consistent.
Yeah, and I hope it doesn't stop. That's the thing. And I'm tracking all my workouts now. I have one day off a week, and I think I've consistently for like the last 2 months trained 6 days a week. And it's my weighted vest day, my cardio day, my weighted vest day, my cardio day. I do it at home. It's quick. It's easy. And when my nephew was here, I mean, he did probably 7 or 8 workouts with me because I was out there doing it. He came out. It was a bit of fun. He could see himself making progress as well from like, which is what's so good about it. Because I think to your point earlier, Rich, around you want to be able to see that you're making some changes with like the push-ups, the squats, the pull-ups. It's so easy to see how you're tracking and making progress. You can try.
Also, you get feedback. You're sore, right? I know that sounds like a kind of like a shallow thing, but the reality is you don't get that when you're walking. But if you do that sort of workout, you just get a bit of immediate feedback around how your body feels like that. Like that's actually quite powerful.
And it's easy. So you can try and do like your max push-ups, and then what if you do 7 to begin with, and then you train it consistently for like 4 weeks, try again, and then the next thing you know, you can do 10. All of a sudden, you're like, this is working, and then you do it for another 3 weeks, and then you can do 15. And then it's that slow consistency. So I think that's the advice I would have given myself years ago don't mess about with silly programs. Just fundamental basics and just be super consistent.
That advice is actually, I think, better advice for me if I can put myself back in my shoes when I was 30s, because again, I don't think I think whilst the steps is a good lead into it, and then I would get onto what you're doing, and then I would get into the gym and I would let it unfold from there. I don't think I would have been happy enough with what the steps would have given me in terms of feedback wise. I don't think it would have felt enough. So I think but again, it still comes down to it's simple and it's small. Right, and you keep building it up. So and it highlights also that everybody's different. So if you're talking to somebody, let's just they're a mom, they've had 2 kids, they've never really been into fitness, they've really let themselves go. Let's say that you're kind of talking kind of like 25% body fat, like actually just jumping in and doing press ups and stuff like that might just be a bit too daunting.
Yeah, that won't work.
So actually the 5K steps option could be really good for that person.
Yeah.
But actually the kind of body weight twice a week, 3 times a week, keep it short, 15-20 minutes, keep it basic, is probably much better for somebody who's maybe got a bit of training experience, or maybe they're not quite like that. Maybe they're sort of 20% body fat, they feel in a fairly good position to jump in and do something like that, and walking would just feel underwhelming to them. But it all falls under the same set of rules, right? Like you need to change your activity, you need to change your food habits, and you need to start developing better kind of like health self-care habits to look after yourself. And you sort of kind of need to find the one thing that's going to float your boat, that's going to be interesting enough to do. And I think you're right, like I kind of changed my mind. Everybody probably needs a bit of feedback within a reasonable time frame, so that they can be motivated to keep doing it and then layer on top of it. And it's probably different for each person.
I think you said it right. I mean, I kind of, so just while Lewis is talking there, and I then go back to that 30-year-old version of myself, and then kind of trying to talk to myself, and then others. It wouldn't work for me. I just wouldn't do that. And I was like, well, why? Because I know that is the most sensible path, but it wouldn't have floated my boat, Daniel, as you just kind of mentioned there. Like, I think actually the key is, hey, what is the thing that you enjoy doing that actually you could probably just do more of? And like, my biggest flaw around that stuff is, and I yo-yoed loads. And I look back today, like, for example, I got, okay, well, I want to go, and I would be a gym goer. Like, I like going to the gym. It's different nowadays. I have a home gym, but like for years, like I like it, and I like lifting weights. Like, that is my therapy. I don't like doing press ups. I don't like doing pull ups. But give some dumbbells and a flat bench or a barbell and doing a press up, and let me put some numbers against it, and let me measure myself, and let me kind of push. I'm going to have fun, and that for me is the key. I think it's kind of when we say what the changes are. There are some changes we can ask people to do that because it's good. You should do that because it's good for you. But the ones that stick, I think either because they're easy to stick, they either make a big impact and so therefore it sticks, or because they enjoy doing it. And so for me, I think if I'm looking at my 30-year-old self, I'm going to say, well, actually, what is it you actually enjoy doing? At the time, I enjoyed running. So, I do that on a fairly regular basis. But again, yo-yoed. I go sprint, pull a muscle, be out for 3 weeks. Like, that's my kind of competitive streak coming through there. And then, like, being in the gym lifting weights. And like, I did loads of things. I did, like, let's say, the Strong List program, which I loved, right? Which was kind of just 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5x5. Great program. I did that for, a long period of time. But as always, I injured myself at some particular point because I was increasing the weight too fast and I wasn't sensible. Now, that's just who I am because I get competitive with myself as well as others. So what happens is I get overly competitive. I wasn't listening to my body. And actually, I wasn't doing any work on mobility or support structures. And that led to injuries. But I think that's a topic for a different day. But what I'm kind of coming back to there is to speak to 30-year-old me to get me to make the changes I've now made as 40-year-old me is it has to click. It has to either be transformational, as in that's going to make a big difference and I can see it making a difference, or I have to enjoy it. And I think with the bodyweight stuff, it is absolutely the right thing to do, but I wouldn't have done it. I would have gone, great idea, yeah, cool, and then I wouldn't have done it because I wouldn't have had, it wouldn't have given me the enjoyment, and I wouldn't have had the discipline to just do it anyway. So I think that's the key thing is when we talk to people, or if someone said to me, "Hey, what change would you make?" Like, well, let's talk about what are the things that you think you should make, and what things you enjoy doing, and and kind of leveraging that a little bit. And I don't know where that comes from, but obviously we're all different, and I reckon a lot of it comes from our upbringing, what you did at school, what sports did you enjoy doing, and all that kind of stuff probably plays a role into it, as well as structure and genetics and whatever else. I'm sure there's a lot more to it. It's just, I think you have to tap into 2 parts of the brain, right? The discipline part and then also the enjoyment part. And I think that's the only way to get long-term changes.
Yeah, it kind of, it's just a reminder actually that, because I really start to think tactically, what would I advise someone? 5K steps, sleep 6 hours, cut out desserts. But it's just not really possible to give that kind of tactical advice. It's much better to think more like a framework, and then for that person to figure out what are the right choices within that framework. So again, without kind of like flogging a dead horse, again, it's like if you can have those mindset shifts, then it really comes down to like I still think changing something around your activity, so becoming a more active person, changing something about the way that you eat, and start to think about things you do that just take good care of yourself. And that could be anything from sleep to controlling caffeine to like whatever. It doesn't really matter too much, right? It's quite person dependent. And then it's like, well, look, it's kind of for you to decide what are the right things. You could be anything from a Rich who the right thing to kind of do the activity there is to actually set up a twice a week full body weight routine. And just to kind of like not go too hard into it, because that's the thing that's going to float your boat. That's the thing that is going to give you the right feedback. That's the thing that you're actually going to be able to start small with, but really enjoy. All the way down to kind of like the mother of three that used to play netball when she was like 20 or whatever. It's like actually just getting back and doing some netball practice and doing something like that. That might be the one thing that they is like getting them more active. But so I think the framework is more important than the specific tactics, or the mindset and the framework. Understand that you're going to be in it for the long haul. You've got to try and build sustainable kind of lifestyle habits, and just be happy to start small and be consistent and layer on top of that. And then from there, sit down and think, well, look, across activity, food, and things that generally are about taking good care of myself, what is the right thing for me to fit in with that framework that I'm going to enjoy and get some feedback from? And it probably looks really quite different for each person. But again, you stick within that framework, and you make some nice changes across how active you are, what you eat, and how you look after yourself after 30 days. And then you're like, all right, cool. If I've got that down, how do I build on that? And again, if you do that, you end up in a really great place in a year's time versus, again, I know what I did is I only took one of those things. So I didn't change the food. I didn't change any of the self-care habits. I just went to the gym 4 times a week. And I was pretty impatient with it. So I was doing like, an hour and a half each session, trying to kind of add weights to the bench. It didn't last. It just fell off many times because I didn't think about it across those kind of 3 things. And I didn't start small when I was really impatient. But the more we talk about it now, I realize that those individual choices about what you should change are drastically different for each person. You've got to sort of find what's your change.
Look, I really like the idea of the framework, and I like the 3 pillars, and then what happens within those pillars, the individual, there's granular levels of detail you can go to. Do you know the one thing which I think is common across whoever those individuals are, which is, I think doing it alone is really hard. And I think support from others makes a big difference. And support might be a community, join a running club, right? And they're super, super warm and welcoming. And the park runs at a weekend, like your couch to 5K type stuff, like just really like getting into it. Food wise, well, actually, what's your partner doing? And actually, are they supportive? Are you eating family meals together? And you're both trying to kind of improve your food. Like, I think, or gym wise, gym community. So I don't know, I don't know how you guys feel, but I think there's doing all these changes alone from leading what is a normal Western life, which is just making you miserable and you're just going to get ill and sick and whatever. Like you're just going to transitioning from that to a healthier life. Doing it completely alone, I think, is pretty tough. So surrounding yourself by people who either understand the journey you're on, they understand it's important to you, or they're on it too. Doesn't matter what stage you're on. Like I think that is probably one of the biggest differences as well. I know for me, it's a huge difference.
That's a really good point. Which is why like CrossFit gyms do so well, right? Because
I was just about to say CrossFit is a great example of that.
Community, and then guys who play football on like the weekends or whatever it is. It's because they got the community, they got their mates, or joining a squash club or whatever it may be. Yeah, that's a really good point. And then the park runs, because you can go and it's social. Yeah. See, I'm a bit of a freak. I don't like training with anyone anymore. I just love doing it by myself. Because for me, it's...
Were you like that in the beginning, though?
I think because I've always trained by myself for like the last 15 years, I've always just gone to the gym. I'm just so... It's like, it's me time now. And it's my time to be alone and just listen to music and just detach from the world. So for me, I love it. Like I don't want to train with him. I didn't want him training with me. He came outside. I was like, all right.
Well, I want to jump in there. Hang on. Let me jump in there. So I totally get you train by yourself. However, you do put your workouts out on Instagram. Obviously, in our WhatsApp group, you put it out there.
Yeah.
Like, so you're socially, it's not necessarily in the moment of the training, but in the surrounding of it. Like, obviously, you and your wife are pretty kind of tuned in on your diet side and whatever else. And then obviously you're putting your workouts out there. I mean, I've been doing some of your workouts, right? You're sharing them. And so there's there's a social element around it too. So I mean, is that playing a role? Is that motivating for you, or is that just actually it makes no difference? It's just something that you do, and
it's not something I've really done that much of, and it's more I'm sharing that more now, just because I'm trying to because I think I'm like a busy dad, and it's more of I'm finding the time, and it's kind of I guess I'm just trying to show other busy dads, like you can squeeze it in. You can like find a way, and it can be really simple, which is just like push-ups, pull-ups, and squats, and you can make some gains. So I think that's why I'm sharing it more of it can be done, as opposed to I don't feel like I'm getting a huge amount from it. I just like to train by myself. That's more of it can be done.
I think I think that's easier to do though when you're at your stage of the journey, because you're very educated on how to put things together. You already live a disciplined life. It's like same goes for me. I train at home. Like I set the garage up as a gym, and you won't get me going to CrossFit or anything. I'm not interested. I'm not interested about even when I like suggest to some of my friends we should work out together. And then we start talking about it. I'm like, shit. Now I'm just going to have to like work out how they can fit into my program. And I don't really want to do a day outside of my program. It screws up my program. And I'm like, no, I'd rather just do my own thing. Like, I shouldn't have offered that. But
I'm going to tell Barry you said that. That session you did with him, hated it.
But early on, I think that is actually quite an important piece, and it's why CrossFit was on my mind as well. I actually even sometimes miss CrossFit quite a lot, but I don't miss the programming, and the methodology is like solid, but the programming is not right for me. The intensity is not right for me. The Olympic lifts aren't right for me. But I'm telling you, when you walk into a CrossFit gym, it feels really good.
Yeah,
you've got a broad amount of people there, from a very advanced person that you can look up to, through to the person who's like at the very, very start of their journey, and it's scalable, and everybody's in the same class. And there's something about CrossFit, like unless you walk into a CrossFit gym and do a couple of sessions, you can't really explain like how it feels. And that's why people that are into CrossFit are so fanatical about CrossFit, and that's why it spread so quickly as well, because god damn, it feels good to spend an hour in a CrossFit gym. It's incredibly positive, and it's so getting that early in your journey can be really, really powerful, because it will help you be consistent. I used to look forward to going to CrossFit for that reason. And then look, once things settle and you become more educated and you've built a base, and if then training by yourself fits your mood or how you fit things into your life and stuff like that, I think it's easier to do. Like, there are some people that are probably just wired to like not want to talk to anybody and just do it themselves. But actually, I think more often than not, people probably would benefit from that kind of like community.
I definitely think
sharing the journey vibe.
But so when I was kind of mentioning social, I wasn't necessarily thinking of CrossFit, because I think actually that's quite a long way down the path, right? I think that actually does require, you have to be kind of zoned in. I'm going to go do a pretty significant thing. I actually went on a much more simple level at the very beginning of the journey, which is like, well, you don't have to do any of these journeys alone. Like, there are people around you who, even if you're just vocal about it, which is like, it might be to your immediate family. It might even just be to other people who are going on a similar journey to you, even, colleagues or friends or whatever it might be. Yeah. It's just like, cool, no, look, actually, it's a bit like, how like dry January took off.
Yeah.
It's that kind of like, it's kind of now almost socially okay. I'm doing dry January. It's because people almost needed that approval. I'm going to not drink for a month. And I kind of feel like there's an element of that with the health shift, which is like, actually, it's sometimes quite powerful. So no, I'm not having dessert Monday to Friday. That's my thing this month. I'm just not doing it.
That's a good one.
And
dessert Monday and Friday.
And I think, like an example I'd give is, obviously I know I'm definitely at the extreme end. I appreciate that now. I haven't always been. It's been a journey. But when I go for dinner, and if I'm with my wife, she already knows exactly the kind of thing I'm going to order and not order. And so more often than not, like, even if I go to order something, she'll grab me. Are you sure it's got thingy? Oh, good point. I won't do that, right? And so, what is it? Well, it's just a moral support. It's not that, like, obviously I eat a weird diet for multiple reasons. It's not because she needs to at all, although she's very, very healthy. But it's much more that you're not alone, or therefore made to feel like a complete weirdo when you opt not to participate in a certain way. So we went out for a drink. We went out with friends for dinner last week. I didn't drink. Everyone else is drinking. You're saying no. Like, some people, that's a bit weird, but because you're with friends who know that's how you that's how you are, you don't feel the pressure for it. Yeah, I went out with dinner with some old work colleagues the following day, and no one has a clue. And me not drinking was like this big kind of shock revelation. You're very alone then. You're like completely by yourself. And everyone else is drinking, and it makes you feel a bit awkward about it. So I'm just thinking socially from subtly. If you're starting that journey, it's quite nice, I think, to just be really upfront about it. A, it holds you to account, and B, I think it gives you some support, which is, hey, I think it could even be a conversation like that, definitely for some people with a loved one. Say, I'm not happy. I want to make a change. Here's what I'm going to go do about it. Support me on this next month. I want to make this change or that change. So I think people should be a bit more open about it. I think most people will be supportive. Because imagine how hard it is. I mean, if you want to make that big kind of change, and yet you're in a household where you're surrounded by everyone else having that dessert Monday to Friday. Like, it's a pretty tough thing, I think. Like, level of discipline you need is really high.
55 minutes, chaps. Are we going to wrap this up?
Yeah, I reckon so. Wrap it up, Lewis. Give us a summary. Where do you think we landed?
Where do we think landed? So if I were to pick a couple of things, I think start small. Start small. Do something that you can do pretty consistently. And for me, and I think it's where you can see some wins as well, because I like Rich, I need to see some wins. So whether it's being able to do more push-ups, or whether it's losing a bit of weight on the scale, whatever it is, just something that you can see a few gains. But start simple, and pick something that you'll enjoy and be able to do. So what will kind of float your boat. So whether it's going for a walk, an extended walk with the dog, if that kind of is what will do it for you, or whether it's dropping down and doing some push-ups and some squats for like 20 minutes or whatever it may be. What else would you guys add as a wrap up?
I mean, I was going to say consistency is key. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we're saying, really, isn't it? So only taking something on that you honestly believe that you can do for a long period of time, and that's how you're going to get those changes. And it obviously depends on people's motivating factor, but if people think that they're going to make a massive change in their life in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it's just not the case, right? It's going to be something you can do for 12 months.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a good word to finish on. I think if you start with how can I build consistency, you have to make true a lot of the things that we've talked about. You have to be patient. You have to realize it's a journey. You have to start small. It's just like, what can you be consistent with? And then it leads you back down to kind of, what you enjoy, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to start there, build consistency. And then the other thing I would just say is think about it holistically. Usually if you just change one thing, like I'm just going to be more active, but still eat a super bad diet, you're just going to have, the handbrake on all the time. Or if you just change something a little bit about your food, but you don't, start moving around more and doing stuff and challenging your body, you just kind of like, it's not going to create a change really. And I think a lot of people that don't see those wins, they're just changing one thing. So I think, consistency, think about it holistically, try and make a change across how active you are and in what you eat and how you look after yourself. But just start super small, be consistent, and then layer something else on and layer something else on. I think we all know that you can achieve a hell of a lot within a time frame of 6 to 12 months if you do that. Like, you can really surprise yourself with the results and the consistency you build, and then you just keep building and building upon that.
Good one.
Cool. All right, let's wrap. As usual, have a good sleep.
Thanks, guys. Good to catch up.
And Rich, have a good holiday as well. You're heading off to the
Will
sun.
do. I'll do the next one from the beach.